Hi, I'm Marc, and welcome to the weekly Outside Views report on American politics. And today, once more, I want to talk about more military aid of the USA for Ukraine against the Russian aggression. The US government has announced new military aid for Ukraine worth $300 million US. And this is ammunition for weapon systems such as the HIMARS multiple rocket launchers and artillery shells, said the US State Department on Wednesday. The United States is also sending anti-tank weapons, missiles and small arms to Kiev. The package also includes trucks and trailers for transporting heavy equipment, as well as spare parts and other essential field equipment. This would allow Ukraine to continue defending itself against Russian incursion. The United States of America is considered Ukraine's most important ally in the defense against the Russian invasion and has supported Ukraine since the beginning of the war of aggression. According to Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, the United States has contributed more than $35 billion worth of military aid since the beginning of the war. And the countries of Northern Europe have pledged their long-term support to Ukraine as well in the fight against Russia's war of aggression. The Nordic countries remain unwavering in their commitment to Ukraine's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders. That was said by political leaders from Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Iceland, and they reiterated it in a joint statement on Wednesday during a visit by the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Helsinki. Both individually and in cooperation with others, they would provide political, financial, humanitarian, and military support to Ukraine for as long as needed, the country said. They also want to help Ukraine on its way to the EU and NATO. As long as it takes, as long as it's necessary. This phrase was repeated again and again at this press conference with Zelensky and Finnish President Sauli Niinistö and the Prime Ministers of Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Iceland. You can trust that we will be by your side for as long as you need it, also said Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said the joint press conference was sending a clear signal that this is about our Europe, our common Europe. They would owe Ukraine all the support they can give. Zelensky surprisingly traveled to Helsinki on Wednesday, and his visit to the Finnish capital has been kept secret until shortly before his arrival. He had already met several of his Nordic interlocutors during their visits to the Ukraine. The Nordic countries have consistently supported Ukraine with military and financial aid since the Russian invasion in February 2022. As they wrote in the statement, the total value of the military aid package is estimated at 4.4 billion euros. In addition, there is financial and humanitarian support as well as emergency aid with a value of over 1.5 billion euros. And Ukraine can hope for significantly more ammunition supplies from the EU. According to the plan presented by the EU Commission on Wednesday, and I mentioned the plans before, the European armaments industry is to be encouraged to rapidly expand production capacities with financial incentives running into the billions. In addition, the governments of the EU states also settled a week-long dispute over the joint procurement of artillery shells and missiles for Ukraine on Wednesday. The agreement provides for up to 1 billion euros to be made available for this in the coming months. The background to the plans is, in particular, the difficulties of the EU states in supplying Ukraine with sufficient ammunition for the defensive war against Russia. An expansion of production should now prevent further bottlenecks in the Ukrainian armed forces and also ensure that the EU states remain capable of defending themselves and keep sufficient supplies. The brave soldiers of Ukraine need enough military equipment to defend their country. That was said by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen on Wednesday. It is also about strengthening European defense capability. Von der Leyen had already announced the plans on Tuesday evening during a meeting with the new Czech President Petr Pavel in Prague. I reported on this in my EU video already. On Wednesday, they were presented in detail by EU Industry Commissioner Thierry Breton. According to this, up to 500 million euros from the EU budget are to be made available for grants by mid-2025. According to the plans, another 500 million would come as co-financing from the member states. The Frenchman said he was confident that production capacity in Europe would be increased to 1 million shots a year within 12 months. The industrial base for ammunition production in Europe is there and has the potential to meet the needs of Ukraine and the member states, he said. The industrial base must now be revitalized in order to adapt to the needs of a high-intensity conflict. When it comes to defense, our industry needs to switch to war economy mode, Breton said. For safety reasons, Breton did not say how many shots can currently be produced a year in the EU. Specifically, according to the draft law, it is intended, among other things, that companies for new projects to expand their ammunition production can have 40% of the costs financed by the EU. If special conditions are met, even higher funding should be possible. For example, if the projects are transnational or if companies agree to prioritize the production of ammunition for the Ukrainian armed forces. And all of this should also help to implement a promise made by the EU in March. And this provides for the delivery of 1 million new artillery shells to Ukraine within 12 months for the fight against the aggressor Russia. The EU states and the European Parliament must now discuss the EU Commission's proposal. The Commission announced on Wednesday that they are counting on a rapid adoption before the summer, although left-wing politicians announced resistance. But I think this is quite an important thing, and the majority of the Parliament and I guess the member states will agree with that. You realize that not the whole video was on the United States, but at the moment some might be annoyed by so much war in Ukraine on this channel. But even when I talk about topics from around the world, one of the biggest topics at the moment is, also because of its geopolitical importance, the war of aggression that Russia started against the Ukraine. We must not forget that this is still happening. You know that when something like this happens, media tend to report less and less about it, even if it's not gotten any better or there's no progress in the right direction. And that's why I have to talk about this more often, and to keep this in the people's minds and to keep in everyone's mind that this war can end today if the one that started the war, this war was a violation of international law. Not to forget that from all other things. I'm not talking about all the other things that are involved there as well. And with all those deaths and this war in the end started in 2014 when Russia annexed the Crimea. But the all-out war that started in last year, 14 months ago, that can be stopped today by one person, and that's Vladimir Putin. And all those Russian trolls running around in the comments and trying to tell that it's the fault of everybody else that Russia had to go to war. I heard this before. And the last one that caused a lot of trouble with this was Adolf Hitler. And he claimed that the Polish attacked Germany and he had no choice but to attack. So think about that one. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.